Now we are live streaming,
right.
so we can discuss that on the meeting that we will have, Felix.
Of course.
Okay, so we are live, and we will wait for 2-3 minutes. I can start though. Hello everyone, my name is Nicholas Panagiotou. I would like to be the moderator of today's event. I would like to welcome you in another series of events that we organize as part of our Gaming Against Disinformation month. I am Associate Professor at School of Journalism and Mass Media Communications, Aristotle University, Greece, and the head of DCN Global. Today's event, it is part of Ideas in Action webinar series that we have launched on March 2020 as a digital communication network with the support of World Learning and also of Citizens and the Educational Exchanges Office from State Department, whom we really thank for their support. This initiative, it aims actually to discuss current and future trends. And among these trends, it is gaming against disinformation. Today's event is about, actually, it is titled about Latin America against disinformation. We are actually discussing an issue that it has captured our attention, but we actually want to see how it has been evolving in different continents. Digital Communication Network has this enrichment, and I would like to thank our today's speaker that have accepted our invitation in order to share their views, their thoughts from Latin America. We have with us Ernesto Núñez Chacón, founder and director of Doble Tracción from Costa Rica. We have Eva Munoz, she's a journalist from Honduras, and we have Felix Staiku, who is co-founder of Cyberdacians and the co-founder of Intel for Patriam Chile. If I will start and I will pass the floor to Ernesto Núñez Chacón, which he runs La Doble Tracción, a transmedia news outlet that since 2014 offers young people a journalistic mix of investigation, humor, and gamification in the form of TV game shows, radio theater, jingles, video games, parties, personality quizzes, and remixes. It has captured my attention, and I'm sure that it will capture your attention as well, because it's a very interesting a new approach. Ernesto, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. The floor is yours. Please unmute. It's my favorite word in every Zoom meeting. I think I've
Thank you for having me, and good morning to everyone, or good evening to everyone, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so my name is Ernesto Núñez Chacón, also known as simply Ernie. You can call me that. I'm the founder and director of La Doble Tracción, which is a transmedia news outlet and production company based in Costa Rica that focuses on producing a mix of journalism, gamification, and humor. I'm a journalist as incisive as Superman's jawline or heat vision.
Ernesto, we can see your notes, and we just missed some part of your presentation because we can see your notes. So if you can do something about your notes, because they're very interesting as well. Thank you.
So I was saying that I'm a journalist as incisive as Superman's heat vision, a creative as daring as the Queen of Pop, a humorist with a humor as acid as the reflux that some politicians provoke on me. My religion is Cyndi Lauper. My obsession is Star Trek. I'm a kid of the 90s, which means that I've been a Power Ranger, a Pokemon master, a Mortal Kombat champion. That's because my first video game was Mortal Kombat. That's not my fault. You can blame my father. And in bed, I'm very, very naughty, but that's another story. I told you right now all that, and I got so personal because that's how personal we as journalists must get to know our audiences in order to battle the news phobia that they suffer. And how do we battle this news phobia? Well, we battle it by making news fun instead of making news anesthesia. News phobia is very, very real, and it basically means that you are either fearful of the news, intimidated by the news, disgusted by the news, so repulsed by the news that you don't even want to get informed anymore. It is so real that even those who are doing the news fall asleep doing the news live, like the guy you can see in the picture. There's an insight here, which is that getting informed is like homework, and nobody likes doing homework unless there's somebody here that actually seeks Friday night to spend it reading the news or, I don't know, doing math, doing calculus, and I don't think so. We have to turn the experience of consuming news from this to this. And in order to do that, we have to take care of people's information needs through their own tastes and preferences, not through our own taste and preference, through their taste and preference, their own quote unquote religion, their own obsessions, their own intimacy, their own quirks. During this presentation, I will tackle three things. First of all, some examples of how we at La Doble Tracción have been doing that through gamification of journalism. I'm going to try then to retrace a little of the process that we use to come up with these ideas of gamification so that hopefully this can serve you in your organization or projects. And I'm then going to point out some challenges specific to the Latin American region that we face to make gamification. The first example that I brought is a game show. So let's analyze this case. Everything begins with a problem, an information need or void. In this case, 40% of Costa Rican eligible voters for the 2018 presidential elections were young people. Yet here in Costa Rica, there still isn't, any news outlet covering the race for young people. So we already knew what we had to do. We wanted to create that platform for young people. But how we were going to do that? You have to then look for insights. Insights are basically an irrefutable, often untapped, but very powerful truth about your audience's behavior. After examining the relationship that young people have or had with the election process, we realized that we as young people were cheating ourselves when we voted. Because since we didn't have information, we really didn't have, we were disempowered to make to have a better decision-making process. Because basically, since there was no available information, no information made for us, we really couldn't evolve in terms of knowledge and information. So we knew what we knew when we started the election process was the same thing we knew at the end. So we often would be voting against our own interests simply because we didn't know, or we didn't know better, or we didn't know more. After you have an insight, that inspires a concept, and that concept is the basis of your gamification. In this case, we realized that, okay, so politicians were taking advantage of the fact that we didn't have information. It was very easy to play with us. And our task as journalists was to stop that and don't allow politicians to play with us. So we came up with the idea, after we emphasized the word cheat, that we were going to create a platform that through games, through playing, was going to allow audiences, younger audiences, to learn and to become immunized, let's say, against politicians that could play with you if you were uninformed, disinformed. So that's how we came up with the concept, play, don't be played. After that, we knew that we were going to do a gamified transmedia show. Transmedia show because we had already determined before all this that there were too many angles to cover, so it was better to go transmedia. And also because on TV and on social media, there was a lot of younger audiences being held. But we didn't know what direction to take our gamification. So once again, we went to the tastes and preference, what I like to call the T's and P's or for audience. Taste and preference are those things that are just very close and personal to someone. In this case, we emphasize party games that young people play. By that, I mean like spin the bottle, beer pong, never have I ever, and all that. We also identified that there was a quiz pandemic going on, which was all this trend about BuzzFeed quizzes to find out what animal you are or what Disney character you are. And also filters, like the whole Snapchat thing, filters that later became very popular on Instagram. So we decided that we were going to infuse party games and with this quiz tendency and have a game show that was going to use party games as a medium to quiz our audience, quiz ourselves, and quiz presidential candidates to see how fit they were to vote or to lead the country. That's a process that I like to call trivialization. Not trivialization in the traditional sense, but here in the sense that we're going to make things like trivia, like fun, but also testing your knowledge. And that's how we came up with La Doble Tracción TV version or multimedia TV show. We had various segments. Each segment tackled a different sub-issue of the main problem. For example, we had an opening monologue. If we analyze this opening monologue, we had to deal with a problem that the election race is a fast-changing process. So every single week, the polls are changing, candidates' positions change, who is closer or farther ahead changes. So we were like, okay, how we're going to open up our show with a monologue that recaps what happened during last week, but how do we make it engaging? One thing we did was that we made it a satirical monologue. But in terms of gamification, we came up with two supplements, and those were gamified trackers. By gamified trackers, I mean these elements that you see in games that help you track your progress, a progress bar, medals, etc. We chose two different gamified trackers. The first were the dummies of the presidential candidates that you can see behind the host. And those dummies would move closer or farther from the host, depending on the polls during that week. And if some candidate crumbled in the polls, the dummy would crumble on air. And the other gamified tracker was the walls, the thermometer walls that you can see behind the dummies. Those thermometers were light up or change levels depending on the polls. This appeals to the explorer that many gamers have in them, that they enjoy more. The part of the game that they enjoy the most is the exploring what's around you in a game. Another segment that we have was a get-together debate segment. This segment, we had 5 different hosts from very different ideological points of view. We had socialists, neoliberals, progressive, conservatives, and they would gather every week and discuss the most pressing issues for the country. So that was great in terms of journalism, but we had a problem. How do we get the audience involved in these debates? We came up with a gamified solution, which was to turn the table in the living room, let's say, into a bingo table. So this became like a shared gamified discussion piece, because every week as host, we would fill the bingo table depending on what topics were tackled in debates or were leading the news cycle. And we provided our audience with bingo boards too. So they could download the bingo boards and they could follow the process with us. And that way they could join and be more engaged with our discussion week to week. Another segment was the game tests segment, which unlike the other 2 segments, this one is the entire piece of journalism, a game. In this case, there's a problem with media coverage around elections, which is that it's very, it doesn't have context. It doesn't have context. It is very different for me to tell you that Costa Rica has X percentage of tax evasion, like that, just like that. That's very different than if I tell you that that's a lot in comparison to the entire region, or that's very little. So we needed to include segments that were able to test how much context we knew about the issues that we were discussing during the presidential race. So the solution was to gamify test ourselves. So we used party games in a trivialized way to test each other and to test our audience about how much we knew about different subjects. So for example, we played spin the bottle, but in Costa Rica, there's the pineapple production. It's a big environmental issue. So instead of using a bottle, we use a pineapple and we would spin the bottle. We would ask the person to which the pineapple landed or pointed to a question. And this person, if he or she got it right, he or she could take a piece of clothing off. Because we were not going to get people naked on TV, so we went the other way around. We overdressed them, and actually they wanted to answer correctly because that way they could take off a garment and stop suffocating, basically under the studio lights. So we had that. We also played Chubby Bunny. This one was about the fiscal situation in Costa Rica. We had this one that basically we divided the hosts in couples. And if one host got the question wrong, his partner or her partner could be shot with a water gun. And we would infuse this with different pressing issues in the country: environment, water, etc. One of our most important segments was an interview segment that we did with presidential candidates. So we would sit with them and we would play Never Have I Ever with them. Why? Because candidates tend to be players, and they tend not to have a position on issues. Like if you ask them about abortion, they're going to like move around, and we want an answer, yes or no. So we started to play Never Have I Ever with them. So basically there was just two choices. Would you support abortion or you wouldn't support abortion? And that's how we got these answers out of candidates, by playing this game with them. And this one in the picture is the current president of Costa Rica, Mr. Carlos Alvarado. In terms of results, over 500,000 hits we accumulated with these videos or interviews, or online interviews, surpass that of dominating mainstream media. 10 out of 13 candidates came to play with us, which included former presidents of Congress, ministers, justices, etc. And well, we were written about by mainstream media. Another example that I brought is a news game. In this case, the Federation of Students of the University of Costa Rica manages even more taxpayer funds than some vice ministries of the government, and yet no one covers that process, even though they are publicly elected by students. This federation has 2 remunerated seats, and each student that occupies this representation seat gets around $1,000 per month to represent students. In the University Council, where all the regulations and budgets are approved. This is a public university. And yet students don't even know about the existence of the University Council, let alone that they have representation in it. So once again, we look for insights that in this case we summarize with two things. First, that the contrary of love isn't hate, but indifference. Because in this case, we realized that we had to deal first with an awareness issue before dealing with the information issue. Like we were not going to be able to inform students about this process if they don't even care and know of the existence of the University Council and the student representatives that they have there. And also that blind date sucks. So let alone a blind hire. And a blind hire was basically what was going on here, because students would be voting and they didn't even know what they were voting on. They would just vote for the presidential part and they would mark down their ballot. And they didn't even know that they were choosing people to get $1,000 per month to represent them. It turns out that the president of the University Council was like the dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences or something like that. And we decided that in order to bring the student world closer to the University Council world, that we were going to ask the president of the council to interview for us the student candidates. Then Since she was a health professional, we decided that we were basically asking her to do surgery on these students, on these candidates, because to me, an interview, a political interview, is like surgery in the sense that we're supposed to make these people spill their guts. So we already knew more or less in terms of journalism what we were going for, but we were like, okay, how are we going to make this engaging? Because people still don't care, don't know about this thing. So the word surgery, immediately, to be honest, sent us to think about this board game called Surgery. And that was great because board games invite competition, invite winning a prize, etc. So we infused the board game Surgery with the interviews that the president of the university council made for us. And we came up with this news game where students basically would have to finish the surgery that the president of the university council had began. And in order to advance across the interview, throughout the interview, they will have to advance in the surgery process. And that's how we managed to get people involved and learn, because we turned the consuming process of the information into an active process where people would compete with each other to see if they got the quiz correctly, etc. And they would share it and win prizes. In this case, we reached an equivalent of 5% of the effective voters in their election. We managed to get some sponsors for the prizes of the game. And we reached the university council, which was great because we made the university council part of the process. One of the last ones, the last examples that I brought are dolls, not voodoo dolls, but dolls. Well, I don't know if someone did voodoo with them. That's not my problem. Basically here, the problem was a problem of memorability and the second life of our investigations. These dolls were part of the transmedia coverage that we were doing for the presidential elections. The issue was that the electoral process here in Costa Rica is very, very long, like 8 months. So basically we were exposing very like hard, serious things about the candidates, but they would go away in a week or whatever. After 4 months, those things go away. So we needed to give that a second life and make them more memorable, especially as election day was approaching. Once again, we came back to the insight that candidates are toying with us, and the word toy immediately sent us into thinking, okay, toys, and our concept is play, don't be played. What if, in order to avoid candidates toy with voters, we make candidates toy themselves? Like we literally make them toys. And we were started thinking, Christmas is approaching. The best gift this Christmas would be information, because a month later, we're going to be on election day. And gifts have this whole thing about, toys have this whole thing about nostalgia in them, like action figures that you have as a kid. I have some in front of me, you can't see them, but I still hold them dear to my heart. And we thought, this is the way to do that. So we started to make paper dolls about our presidential candidates, satirical paper dolls, where behind each garment or each piece of paper clothing, you would have a piece of the investigation that we had done about these presidential candidates. So for example, this one has like a mummy outfit, because it's a guy that has run for president 5 times. And even though he has lost 5 times, he still keeps on seeking the presidency. So he's basically like the mummy in every single process. And these are other examples I just wanted to show you here. This one was a guy who wanted to invade indigenous territory. So that's why we use this mask of the Pocahontas villain. And many other things. We managed to distribute 3,000 of these paper dolls. We use bars and popular young people's venues to distribute these paper dolls. And people would share them and post how they were dressing up their candidates. And they would even come up with their own ideas about how to dress and make fun of these candidates using their information. Last but not least, we also have a speed dating event example. This was in response to the polarization that those elections left in our country. We were so divided that even we would rather listen to someone who thinks like us, even though we didn't know if they were right or wrong, which was a pity, a shame, because there are many bridges and common ground that we have between each other, but sometimes one issue where we don't agree tends to eclipse all that. So we came up with the concept, Find Your Match. To be honest, inspired by Tinder, which is basically a speed dating site. So we decided to create a club, a debate club, called Lightning Debates, where young people would come along with politicians, decision makers, and they would, we would separate them in partners and they would debate each other one-on-one. And every 8 minutes, they would change partner and they would debate a different question about the subject. And this was done in bars. So basically here you can see a congressman debating with young people, young students, well, sharing a beer at the same time. And the idea was to create that horizontality of communication between decision makers and citizens, and have them be able to find common ground along the way. La, 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 la. In this case, in terms of results, well, you can see some of them on the screen, but to me, the most important one was one of the quotes that one of these congressmen told us. He said, if we had done this dynamic in Congress, we would have agreed sooner on gun reform. That to us, to be honest, was orgasmic, because it was the main objective of this activity. I mean, to have a dynamic, a gamified dynamic that would catalyze the process of finding common ground. And this congressman was basically saying that it would have helped if they had done that to find common ground on gun reform, which is one of the most polarizing things, I think, in many countries. In terms of conclusions, I just want to say that there's no formula. There's just a formula-ish to do gamification. You have to get naked to do gamification, in terms of you have to get rid of all your insecurities and all these boxes and just go for it. And I mean, if Grindr is something that is popular for your audience, go for Grindr. I mean, there's really no rules about it. Be like Ditto, which is this morphing Pokemon. If you are a 90s kid like me, like, just don't think of any specific form, just let yourself find that form, whatever that is. And in Costa Rica, I have learned that in Latin America, less is more. You don't have to go big in terms of programming and all that. You can just do less and have it be impactful. And also, we as journalists have a job of like evangelization to do, because gamification is not that popular, at least not in Costa Rica, I would say. So we really have to explain people what it is and why it is effective. So thank you very much. And this is my email in case you want to talk further or talk to training or talk collaborations. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernesto. It was Ernesto Núñez from Costa Rica with a very innovative presentation related with his approach in news and actually discussing new ideas, etc., in the field. I would like now to pass the floor to Eva Munoz. Eva, she is a journalist from Honduras. Eva, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being part of this webinar. The floor is yours.
Hello. Okay, just let me connect again with my computer, since I had a problem with it and I had to disconnect with it. But just to be brief, I'll explain how my presentation is going on. First of all, I'm going to talk how is the political situation right now here in the Northern Triangle, what we're doing against and what we're doing to keep these games against disinformation, and what had we done as a group we have this platform called Quemando Micrófonos. I'll later explain it to you. But first of all, just let me connect again here with my computer. Okay, it'll take me a moment. Let me check again. Sorry to you, I had it already done. Or we can go with Felix and then we can come back to me.
Okay. So we will move on with Felix Staiku. Felix, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Felix is co-founder of Cyber Dacians and the co-founder of Intel for Patria from Chile. I have to mention here that the car that I learned to drive, it was a Dacia, Felix. So I was really appalled by from.
So you're a real driver. If you can drive a Dacia, you're a real driver. Yeah, thank you, Nicolas, for introducing me. So, yeah, my name is Felix. I'm the co-founder of a cybersecurity company here in Chile. I'm part of a startup accelerator here in Chile. So this is one of the reasons I arrived here, and I'm the co-founder of Intel for Patria, which is basically an NGO that fights disinformation. Mostly in Romania, because that's where I came from. So that's where I built my connections, and I understand very well, I would say, the social and economic environment / political and / geopolitical that drives disinformation. But as I moved to Latin America, of course, it was a big change. But in the meanwhile, I started to accommodate with all the things that are happening here and start to understand a bit the culture, the people, the society, the politics, and the economy. And basically today my presentation is about how I understand that disinformation functions in Latin America and what is my plan to counter it. So I have a short presentation, and basically I would like to discuss more like openly rather than speaking me alone here. Anyway, Ernesto, your presentation was great. I really like your approach on fighting disinformation and fighting political, I'd say, political bullshit that is coming from politicians. So I think it's great, and it's a great way of connecting with the people and making them more engaged in the political side, which is great.
Thank you.
So today, you can see my screen, right? Yeah, great. So today the topic was serious game against disinformation, and basically we can understand that disinformation is a topic that affects all the countries, especially now when we are more open to interact with news coming from different channels, not coming only from the TV or from the newspapers as it came before, but coming from all types of channels, and everybody can be the subject of disinformation or can be the perpetrator of a disinformation. So that really changes how we see information and how we interact. And especially disinformation works the best when there is a social event involved. So Chile, as you might know, in 2019 in October had a very, I would say, big social event, which can be shown here. They say the revolution of Chile, when the young people woke up against the government, against the hyper-capitalistic government that run the country since the Pinochet era, which was a, I would say, hyper-capitalist dictator put in by the United States to run the country. The problem is, here, inequality is so big, and you can feel this in all levels of society. For somebody that comes from Europe, you can see that everything is divided. private school, public school, private hospitals, public hospitals, and so on and so forth. For me, when I came here, for me it was interesting of seeing that everything has a private and a public version, and then if you don't have the money, you have to basically go to a public hospital, which will be so bad. So we see here a huge social case that happened in Chile in October 2019, and metro station got burned, supermarkets got burned, churches got burned. So in the countries, the situation was terrible, and nobody trusted what they were saying in the TV. They polarized so much between the people that were doing the revolution and the people who were defending against it. So basically, who were defending against it, a small group of people that are actually having a good life in this regime and would like to maintain it like this. So basically, we saw a lot of violence turning in the streets, and people were super polarized between people fighting for justice, as they saw it, a more free country that respond better to them, and I would say the same state. And of course, in this violent environment, disinformation start to thrive so much. Disinformation started to thrive in WhatsApp. The people were organizing in WhatsApp groups, on Telegram groups. They wouldn't listen to normal news outlets anymore. Normal news outlets were showing only violence that are happening in the streets. But the real story wasn't only about violence. It was about normal people wanting a change. And when it all started, it was super confusing in the country because the TV wasn't saying the whole story. It was showing this violent perpetrator or showing the police fighting with them. And basically it became a hot ground for disinformation. I witnessed firsthand how this disinformation was in that moment, because I was actually in a vacation at that time in Chile, and I was going in the south of the country, and they stopped us on a highway. They made like a big fire. They turned supermarkets on fire. Army was on the streets fighting with the protesters, and it was terrible. And I remember speaking with my girlfriend that time, and she was in some WhatsApp groups, and she received so many different videos. For example, the police fighting with protesters, or the police putting violence on some people. And some of the videos were legit, but most of them weren't. So most of them, the videos, for example, they were for a long time ago, or they were from another country. But basically, because the situation was so inflamed, everything that you can put in the media against one group would work. So that's why I think it's a huge factor of disinformation, because in those type of situations, critical thinking it's gone, because you have your convictions, you believe this, you are super passionate about what you're doing, even if you're one side or another, and then any news that comes and inflames your spirit even more, it's very easy to pass through that filter. You don't have that filter anymore, so it's very easy for you to believe it and then to share it further. And I think these social events that really change how Chile is as a country since then really prove that the country is very vulnerable to disinformation. Because before this, it wasn't such a big topic. Coming from Europe with disinformation, it's something that you speak about every day, and people actually know a bit about it. In here, it wasn't a topic worth considering, because there wasn't a conflict so much. It was a smaller political conflict, but it wasn't so strong that they would use disinformation as a tool to get to their political objectives. But since this moment, they understand that social media, WhatsApp, and all these channels of communication are a super important tool of manipulating and gathering the people and influencing the way they think. And since that moment, I think it was a turning point in the Chilean society. forever, because it really changes how this information is spread. It really changes how people are seeing information. You can see here in the middle of the streets were full of graffitis, and here say apaga la tele, sal a la marcha, close the TV and go to march. As I said before, in the TV they were showing only one side of the story, and this polarized the people even more. Not having access to objective information that presents the case how it is. Why is the people coming in the streets? It's not only violent people that comes to break windows. Why does the people come in the street? Why are the people unhappy? So presenting only one side of the story in the TV made people really angry. And then they turned from the TV and they went in WhatsApp and they went to communicate in their channel of messages. And everything that goes through that channel, they cannot be controlled. So you have a group of 10,000 people, you send the news, you can make your own website, and then let's make a news against the regime. For example, they say that President Piñera was having fun at a wedding at the time of the protest. They sent a picture with him. Look at this. President is having fun at a wedding at the time of the protest. Everybody, oh, this president is, again, we are so much against it. Let's change the regime. But the picture was, for example, for 6 months ago. But in this moment, when you make people so polarized, critical thinking is gone. And I think that's the biggest problem when we speak about disinformation. I don't think there is a real way of fighting disinformation. Making fact-checking platforms, educating, the lie is spreading much more faster than the truth. So a lie can turn all earth, I would say, in a few hours, while the truth can take a few days just to arrive to some ears. So you cannot really counteract it, only with one thing that we also would like to make in Chile, which is education. So educating the people to have this filter, to pass through that filter. Is it true what I'm reading? Does it make any sense? Does this news that I'm reading or picture, does it make me feel super angry, or does it make me feel like I want to make something that is not me? If your answer is yes, usually you have to look into it. You have to filter it and to look in more sources, give more attention. But basically, that's where you have to start. We saw fact-checking platforms in a lot of countries, and without a strong educational system that can back them, is not. I don't think they could have the impact that they require, because people that are affected by this information, they don't usually go on a fact-checking platform to check is this true or not. So it's basically there for being there. So our strategy in Chile. So I arrived here 1.5 years ago. Until I learned Spanish, has been a trip, a while, so I could understand a bit the people and what they're writing in the newspaper. But now I do, and I basically found this program that is made by the U.S. Embassy in Chile. So they are sponsoring projects that are fighting some social issues, and one of them is information. And me coming from Europe and being engaged in some programs against disinformation, I thought, okay, I can use my skills from Europe to bring them here and to try to educate the Chilean population against the dangers of disinformation. So our strategy is the following. So basically, what we want to do is to raise awareness about disinformation, to make people aware. Okay, this can be fake, this can be true, or this can be in the middle. This is how you can cut some context from a presentation or from a declaration and sound different. Making people aware how disinformation works, it really help them to understand that this actually is a phenomenon, and somebody is using their brains to spread the fake message for their interest. And people, when they understand this, they say, okay, hey, stop. Let me think a bit more about how this is working, because I don't really want to be used by somebody else that just want to use me and my network of people to gain some more votes or to change something. And our strategy is the following. We know that we cannot arrive to the whole people. it's super hard, especially for somebody with limited resources and limited network in Chile like me. So we want to train community leaders. So going through community leaders, we choose from, let's say, from students, from companies, from journalists, from different type of population, for poor population, middle population, and rich populations. We choose the people that have a bit of influence in that population. So we take the people that run them and we try to educate the community leaders, because we know that the community leaders, after they know something, they can spread the message easier because they have the influence and they have the network. So our workshops is designed to train the trainer, train the community leaders against disinformation through workshops, and then offering them the materials to train further. So when we speak about materials, we are thinking to make short videos, 1 to 5 minutes, that are saying in an easy language with some funny, I would say some funny interaction that can make them not bored about the subject, to really understand how this phenomenon works, and to transmit in 1 to 5 minutes something that they can actually remember. We are not gonna train them a master degree in 5 minutes, of course, but to give them something to at least to put that critical thinking on, because that's the most important. Once you have that critical thinking on and start asking the questions, is this true? Why I'm reading this, and what kind of feelings does this make me feel? Once you start to make this question, I think your whole life will change, and everything that they try to feed you, all the society, will be put in questions. And just that's the first step, and we want to make that first step with the people. And of course, we will use some written materials and podcasts with experts from different countries to actually explain how their strategy works in those countries and how they educate the people. So we want to use a simple language, but actually to put them face to face with examples of disinformation, give them a news to analyze it. Do you think this is fake or not? Or tell me a suspicious thing that you see about this news. Maybe the name of the author is wrong, or they don't have the name of the author, or the website is registered three days ago, or something similar with this, to teach them to look for the signs that indicate us that this information. So basically, after we do this, we also plan to create a fact-checking platform where everyone from our community can flag up suspicious messages coming from WhatsApp, newspaper, Telegram, email, or other channels. Having this, because we plan to create this community that is self-sustaining. We communicate. If somebody wants to ask us, hey, do you think this is fake or not? Can you help me? Because look, I interacted with this kind of news. Please help me to understand. So we'll have this, I would say, maybe a WhatsApp group where everybody can communicate easily. And then we will build a fact-checking platform when everybody can flag up news messages, phishing attacks, because here phishing attacks are another, I would say, another important topic. Deceit is its home here, I think, and so everybody tries to steal from the other with email messages. So here critical thinking plays an important part. So if you don't click that download attachment from an email, you shouldn't share the news that you don't trust. So it's basically the same principle. So we will try to create something that it's I would say it's a different that what it really is, and give people the voice, give people the power. But of course, not everybody can post on that platform, because there needs to be some sort of control, some sort of external control who can actually check if the information is fake or not. And the end result would be to create a critical thinking mindset that I believe that is the most important skill to have to fight against fake news. And this is an initiative that we started in Romania as well, to introduce critical thinking in curriculum in schools, because we see the countries that are the most resilient against disinformation are the Nordic countries, Finland, Denmark, Sweden. And why they have different? Finland, for example, they have critical thinking in schools, so they use critical thinking, I would say, strategies to teach students to ask questions, to don't believe what the professor is saying without asking the question. and you can see that they are highly resilient against disinformation. So I believe this is a skill that everybody would need to have it in the coming years, especially our kids that will be grown in the informational world, such as us. And with this amount of information that is traveling, knowing to select is a very important skill, and knowing to choose your information. Yeah, thank you. That was my presentation. Here is my email. I'm based in Chile, but hopefully I'll come to Europe soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you. We're looking forward to meet you in person as well. Just one short comment. I really like the presentation and the issues that you highlighted, especially for being critical consumers. As a professor, I really liked as well the example of professor and students, but I have to say that depends the professor and it depends on the students, whether or not they're in democracies or not. And I have a very good example to give you, but it cannot be on air. Okay. Let me move now to Eva Munoz. Eva, thank you for being here again. And now the floor is yours. I don't have to emphasize that you are a young Honduran journalist because it is obvious that all three speakers are young, with the exception of the moderator that is almost double-aged. Okay, so.
Okay, let me share it from my computer. You tell me if you can see it.
Yes. Yes, we can see it, and thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this is the Games Against Disinformation. The pandemic right now we have to fight in is against fake news, because actually with everything going on, we have to move to more technological platforms and everything. So just let me explain how everything is going on here right now. Like in the Northern Triangle, we have these three guys, which are the presidents, Gimatei, Juan Orlando, and Nayib Bukele. For example, these were some fake news presented by the president of Guatemala. First, he presented this video in which all the journalists were around the first patient that supposedly was diagnosed with COVID that she was getting from the airport. But then they realized that that video was not from Guatemala, actually was from Honduras. And they were saying that they had this journalist in quarantine, but after 6 hours of journalists insisting for the government to provide them the videos or everything or the information about this journalist, they had to admit that actually it was not true. It was a video from Honduras. Another one was when the president said that people could go to the beach and continue with their daily activities besides of having this COVID. And the next day he had to go in this news and everything and tell everyone it was not true and to stay at home. And as well, the third one was the Gimatei had to send this. He sent this message that Guatemala was ready for the worst scenario, and their hospitals were habilitated for many people and everything. But then they were asking for help of the students of medicine, and they said that they didn't have the materials to provide to the medical equipment to provide to all the students. So since they said this, they were completely showing that they were not ready for this pandemic. Again, we have this. These are tweets from Nayib Bukele. He said Italy would let those over 80 die because its health system will collapse and needs to make space for those who have more possibilities to live. I really don't know what to expect of the Congress. We need a state of emergency now. Okay, so after he tweeted this, the Italian embassy in El Salvador had to correct the president and to point out it was a fake news. As well, it was this flight from Mexico to San Salvador, which the president tweeted that there were 12 confirmed cases of COVID. This was when still the pandemic was starting. So it was like kind of alarming for people to have actually 12 confirmed cases of COVID going to the country. So this was for the airports to close. So after that, he again had to, the Mexico's foreign minister had to tell that this was not actually happening. And then he tweeted, and this was one of the most alarming tweets of the president of El Salvador, that some people have not realized, but the Third World War has already started. So even though the pandemic was like a really terrible thing, we cannot take for granted that it's actually about a Third World War. And now this one is from Honduras. The Honduran government announced the construction of more than 90 hospitals at the beginning of the pandemic. However, they have not started even one, and they actually said that they were going to build up this mobile hospitals, but they never started them. It was a case of corruption, actually, and it has cost more than $48 million to the country. Then the president announced the distribution of more than 9 million masks made of impregned chemical that will kill coronavirus, which doesn't exist. And if it did, well, what a great mask to have it will be, though. And then the president also announced that he was tested positive of COVID-19 with his wife. And then this local news called Contracorriente came out and showed that actually this was not true, and the president was never tested positive for COVID. So the vaccine that we're looking for right now, it's a vaccine for disinformation and fake news, but we need to have somehow to get to these youth, to get to the young people. So this is the games against disinformation that we have been doing here in Honduras, from this initiative called Quemando Micrófonos. This one started as a project in bars. We're going to have people and everything. We had our panelists there. We had 2 moderators, and we were going to be asking this questions about what was going on. And it was all done in bars. So the idea was, since in Honduras we don't have too much young people participating in this kind of topics, because everything is polarized, and we actually don't have young people interested in these topics, because whenever we talk about politics in Honduras, first thing it comes in mind is corruption. And as I show you the news that we had, it's understandable why people, the first thing that they assume is that everything is not working, and that it's just a new way to get money. And people who participate in politics, they're just trying to win something else. So the idea was to talk about politics, not necessarily about a political party. So we were going to take topics as, for example, feminism. We were going to talk about human rights. For human rights, we will also talk about corruptions. We will talk about migration, which is a big problem here in Honduras. So in our first event, we talked about, we had this thing of the president's brother, that he was captured in Miami in 2018 due to problems because he was this drug dealer and everything. So how was that the president's brother was involved in cases like this? So we had we invited a journalist from here from Honduras and as well a journalist from the US, which were covering up these cases. They went to New York to cover up all what was going on as well. They were invited, and let me check, because this one is like, let me check. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you can see it there.
Yes, yes.
Let me check. Okay, so this one is the page of Quemando Micrófonos, all the concept. This one was the guy that we had in our first event, which was in the bar, in the first bar. Here, they are. We're not going to have the audio, but she was covering up everything that happened about the drug dealers here in Honduras, and as well she also covered it in New York. Here the bar was full, as you can see. We had many people. This was before COVID. This started by February of 2020. So we had this first event and it actually went well. We had these pages, people, we had a bingo. We played bingo here, and we were going to have typical words that we were going to listen during the news. We were going to have like migration. We had words like corruption, so people can actually identify it. So here we were going to start to provide news for young people. As you can see, we have a really young audience here, everything going on. This was our first event. We were going to plan to have one every month. Here it was our second event. This one was done in March. But after the pandemic started, we have to move online. So we started to have all these events online. But for example, this first event was about, the first event we had online, it was about the mental health and physical health of everyone during quarantine. So we had actually these young doctors, we have some analysts, we have some psychiatrists and everything. So they can actually provide us some information about how we can take care of ourselves during this pandemic. And we actually have all this interaction with it. But we didn't only stay with talking about it. We also had some other movements. For example, this when they announced that we were buying, well, then Honduras was buying these hospitals, but they never came here. We never saw them. So here we put a flag. This one is like a really common place you can see here in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And it had a flag. This one was actually done by a designer but it never happened. It was just here with the hashtag "Dónde está el dinero," which means where is the money? And people actually were sharing it and were like, hey, where is the money? We need to know where is the money for this mobile hospitals. So there we were fighting this fake news that government were telling us that they actually bought it and that we had it, but we cannot see it. So we were reminding people, hey, this is going on. So people will actually be sharing that. There were many scandals during this time. So for example, we also created this that it was like in a, it's better in Twitter, this one. So this one was like, hey, screenshot, which is the new scandal that we're going to have here in Honduras. So you were going to play it and it was going to revolve and everything. And then when you pause, it was, for example, EH, which is the electrical energy. So we were going to go like, hey, this is the new scandal coming out. And all these institutions actually that are being mentioned there have actually been mentioned before with a corruption case or by many entities. As well, we also had this reunion that it was a webinar, like at the end of 2020. And we were going to ask people, okay, we were playing this, but as well, people, we provide them the information so that they can connect. And we were going to, this was called Burning 2020. Since the concept of our program is burning microphones, this one was Burning the 2020. And we were going to ask like, which was the phrase of the year? And we were going to have the options and people were going to vote, and people voted for the one that, where is the money? And we had several questions. For example, which was the political event of the year? And people will go like, since during the pandemic, they had this new, I forgot the word in English, but it was a Código Penal. So this actually wasn't working in favor. Thank you. This was actually working for all the corrupt people, and everything in the law was going to work in favor of them. So people vote that was one of the biggest political events. And as well, the Maxi, which was against the corruption here in Honduras, it was the Congress voted for it to leave the country. So people were like, okay, this is a strong message that Honduras is actually not fighting against corruption, but it's working its way for it to work for them, not for the people. And which was the biggest scandal of the year. People said about the mobile hospitals. You can see it was like 13 people voted for it, because it's kind of hard also to get people involved to do these things while you're in a live and everything. But we actually were surprised we had participation for it, because it was like really more into us. And then again, we reopened because we have this new modality of doing again the quemando micrófonos in live and as well in webinars. So while we are in the bar with like a limited amount of people, we also have it. We're also having it through Facebook. So here we have it again. We have the social distance and everything. In the bar, there are like only 15 or 20 people, when before we had like 100 people there. So it has been changing, but we're working on it. Let me check. So as Ernesto said, it's not like here in Latin America, we have many games against corruption, but we're working on it. This is the platform we created for it. It was 1 year ago, and we're still working and searching for new ideas. We're trying our best to have new things. We already have another plan for the July 7th. It's against this thing called sedes in Honduras. That is basically the government providing our land to another people with the idea that it's for creating more employment and everything, but it actually is touching our nuestra soberanía. How do you say soberanía?
Sovereignty.
If anyone knows.
Sovereignty.
Yeah, sovereignty. So we're actually talking about this topic because it's something that actually interests us, but we need to see how we have young people in this. So it's not only like, it's happening this and whatever, but to create conscious of what's wrong about it. And that's basically, that's what we have been doing here from Honduras. And yeah, we know there are many games, and actually I really love what Ernesto has been doing. Like, it's very creative, and I'm going to cheat some of those because they're really good ideas. As well, Felix, the way they have been talking about how they try to engage these people, these young people, to learn to news. And what we have done is through bars, through comedy, through simple words, to try to engage these young people for them to know what's going on in Honduras, all the corruption that is going on, and that we can actually do something about it, not just to know that it's going on and just let it happen. So that's basically what's going on here.
Thank you, Eva. You have given us a very thorough as well view of the situation in Honduras. I have just a comment to make. There is, I like this bar Sante. It used to be one of my favorite in Greece as well. And also I really liked from all presentations the way that you actually engage your audience in a very constructive and innovative way in terms of how you actually try to attract attention, because it's not only about, as it has been mentioned, about publicizing something. It is much more about how this content will be engaging and how actually it will be meaningful from the audience. I would like actually, because it has been mentioned many times, and especially because Felix has this, let's say, capability for comparison between Europe and Latin America. I would like to ask to all of you actually, do you see do you see some let's say foreign powers behind these disinformation campaigns as it happens in Europe? Do you see can you attribute these campaigns to specific, let's say, political forces? I mean, sometimes in Brazil, to the extent that I have followed, it is obvious. And in addition to that, regarding vaccines, have you seen a campaign of disinformation in this case? And my last question is about gamifications. You think that it managed to address the issue to a certain extent? Who wants to go first? I emphasize the disinformation because it's my area of specialization, but I can go all the way, and especially for the audience engagement. But please.
I can start a bit.
Please.
On the question, that the first question, I think that's the most pressing, and all of them are important questions, but this is, I think, important regarding the influence of foreign states. Well, it's not attributable, as most of the things are in cybersecurity are, because it's super complicated to attribute some sort of disinformation to another country or to another person, because there are cyber ways of making this unattributable. But I would say it started to be before the 2019 social case here in Chile. I don't know, but after this we see a lot of communist influence coming in this country, because now what is happening now in Chile, they voted for a new constitution, and in the last elections, communist parties and extremist parties, I would say, they have more influence, much more influence, around, let's say, 70 versus 30% from the other side. And every type of elections, you can see the president of Venezuela, for example, congratulating the movements. And in here, I see, of course, there can be a case of dragging Chile on the socialist slope, can be a good case for other socialist countries in Latin America or in the world. So I see here, maybe I'm not sure exactly what is the power of Venezuela in terms of digital influence, but you don't need too many resources to make that influence. You just need a good strategy and then a good entrance point. So I don't have any proof at the moment that is happening here, but I'm sure it happening in some sort. So it's not basically only Venezuela. It can be also China in the case, because China is the biggest export partner of Chile. And in here, Huawei with the 5G, they are like they are the biggest partners in telecommunications, rather than in Europe where they banned 5G with Huawei. And we can see also Huawei paying the press here in Chile in some cases to put some good cases. So it's it's maybe not disinformation, but it comes in the other side, advertisement / propaganda, being not super close, I thought, to the United States ideologically. Even if Chile started, I would say that one of the smaller brother of the United States ideologically, you can see it going further, and US losing the grip on Latin America is no small thing, because Latin America has always been, I would say, a bit in between socialism and capitalism. But now, if it will be a very good case for the enemies of the United States if all Latin America would slip away from capitalism and go into more socialism. So even though I don't have any direct proofs, like it's like we may have in Europe, where the hybrid warfare is in full on, but I think here it's a very important strategic region that if you influence it correctly, it can bring long-term benefits for the people that are influencing it. So that might be the case. I leave my colleagues as well to respond.
Thank you, Felix. Ernesto?
Well, specifically in regards to Costa Rica, I don't see foreign powers cultivating disinformation here, at least not in the traditional sense like you would see, for example, in the US, where there are like Russian bots and that stuff, or certain countries trying to press certain agendas. I don't feel that happens in Costa Rica. I actually think that there are national powers responsible for disinformation. You have politicians that, even though they are opposing politicians who are not in government, and they see that it is very fertile land to push for certain pieces of disinformation that might not be true, but that generate a lot of engagement. Because as Felix mentioned, and I think a couple of us mentioned as well, it is easier to engage people with what they think they know is true than with journalism. Because journalism doesn't tell you this is true, this is true, this isn't. It is supposed to give you a balance, a plethora of perspectives, and allow the audience to make their own conclusions. I actually think that one of the main sources of this information, it's a tendency that I think is rampant in Costa Rica, and I see it also in other Latin American countries, which is the editorialization of journalism. I might not seem like a very traditional journalism, but I've actually been labeled a very old school journalism, because for me, journalism is not opinion, it's not editorial content. Journalism is supposed to be precise, contextualized, and balanced. I don't have to tell you what to think. I have to give you all the sides of the coin and all the edges of the coin, and you make your own conclusions. But in Costa Rica, they have found out that it is easier to engage with editorialized content or just editorial content. It is easier to make news about the president, calling him names, inserting adjectives, pushing certain insinuations, than just saying the facts. Because it is just, I mean, to be really honest, it's easier to engage me by telling me that someone who I hate is a than if you tell me the good and the bad about that person. And that's what journalism, my colleagues, I don't even like the term colleagues because I don't feel close to them, to be honest, because they have abandoned journalistic principles. But that's what they've done. They've editorialized, or they have started to substitute journalism for editorial content, which are two different things. To me, editorialized content is content that is shady because it is presented as journalism, but it is actually editorial. And there's also media outlets that have decided to go the editorial way, transparently, but that's also dangerous because to me, there's always a need for some sort of journalism, for someone to say, okay, that's your point of view, this is a point of view, we're going to pass this through the litmus test, which is the journalistic process, and tell you what sticks and what doesn't, and you make your own decisions. I actually, for example, we have an initiative called Shit Detector, like El Miedo Detector, which is focused on not fact-checking. It's not a fact-checking service. It's a service that revises so-called news outlets. Because I will tell you, I'm sorry, but news outlets, like even official, formalized, big media, they don't do journalism. I mean, they publish stories that do not meet journalistic standards. I have seen stories where they accuse the first lady of doing X, Y, and Z, and they didn't even ask her for comment. I'm sorry, that's not journalism. That's not journalism. So the Shit Detector actually matches a little the initiative and the dynamic that Felix's program has, because we are going to community leaders to train them to become shit detectors themselves and have them work in a gaming-like strategy where the more shits they detect, the higher ranking shit detectors they become. So to be really honest, I think at least in Costa Rica, and I would venture to say in Latin America, the real enemy is in the house. National leaders and even so-called journalists. I'm sorry, I can say openly. As I said, I don't even like the term colleague anymore, because to me, just because we studied the same thing doesn't make us close in any way. But I'll give Eva the floor now.
Thank you. Eva?
Okay, Honduras is this interesting country which has everything, everything of the worst, but still we love it, and it's just a beautiful country at the same time. So actually, there are some topics in which, yeah, I believe we have foreign influence. For example, when it comes to migration, right now, well, there was this famous caravans in which thousands of Hondurans started, and they were going to the US. We had like 5,000, 7,000, and it was, while they were walking, they were adding more people. Guatemala people was there. Mexico people as well came into this caravan. Many of them stayed in Mexico, and they tried to cross to the US. So after this started happening, because migration has always been here in Honduras, like it's something very common. But when it started to be so massive, they started this campaign that your North was here and everything, that we had opportunities in Honduras. They started talking about this to give employment to thousands of Hondurans, like 600,000. Like it was a big amount of employment, which never happened. But the thing is that these were paid by the U.S. Embassy because they were trying to keep our people away from their country. They also have these campaigns in which, like the Zetas in Mexico were going to send these videos of Honduran being tortured in the frontiers. So they were afraid to go there, and they were actually asking for money. As I told you, this had always happened, but they never went so viral until these caravans were so massive. But as well as in Costa Rica, we also have our fake news house. But this one doesn't exactly come from the media. They come from the government. So these strategies had been played long time ago, in which they start faking news. First, to put the government like it's a really good government, or the second one, to avoid the information that it's actually going on in the country. For example, when the president said that he tested positive from COVID with his wife, actually there were doctors say that he had tested negative, but he was like, no, I'm positive. He was even hospitalized and everything. And the thing is that happened like June 17th of 2020. June 15th of 2020, Univision had shown us interviews of the president's brother, which he was involved with El Chapo Guzman, like a drug dealer from Mexico, the most famous drug dealer ever in Mexico. So they were talking about him meeting the president's brother and how they were talking about passing these drugs through Honduras and everything. So that happened the 15th. 2 days after that, the president tested positive. So all the news went to what's happening to the president. So in Honduras, what we have is not that we forget about news, but there's always something bigger happening every time something terrible happens. For example, every time they mentioned the president's brother, we already knew as a fact that we're going to have another news that it was going to be worse. For example, when he was captured, when he was going to have he was going to the court the first day, they started like to kill people in prisons, and they were called like the maximum security prisons. So everyone was talking about the prisons and stopped talking about the president's brother. And that's how it had been going, the agenda setting of the news here in Honduras. It's always like whenever it's something about the president, or when we get to know something of the president, they always get another thing, and it's just getting worse. For example, in Honduras, they are against the gay rights. They have always been against abortion. So when they started talking about the president, the president's brother in the U.S., they said that they were going to put this law against the gay marriage and the abortion. And it was like, why are they talking about this when it has always been against the law? And like they get through the emotions of people, because people start like, no, we should fight for the rights of the people. Women should be allowed to get their abortions and whatever. But they just get these topics when we have something of the president. So we have influence international, and as well we have national. So yeah, it's also the disinformation here. It's in favor of actually the president or the government, or for us to forget what's going on with the president.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva. I would like to thank you all for your very thoughtful comments as well as very critical. I also don't like the term colleagues because it applies that the whole media system or whatever, or professional organization, it's the same. We're not, I think that we have, this might have been the example of the previous decades, which is not valid anymore. I would like now to ask if anyone else has any other question. Okay, otherwise I would like to thank very much our speakers, Eva Munoz, journalist from Honduras, for being part of this webinar. I would like also to thank Ernesto Núñez and also Felix from Puerto Rico and also Felix Taiko from Chile for being part and sharing with us their approaches and also their ideas and thoughts. This webinar has been part of DCN Global Initiative regarding Ideas in Action, a series of webinars supported from World Learning and Citizens Exchanges and Educational Office from State Department. It has been a part of our series regarding gaming against disinformation. I would like to thank you, all the members of the group, for being today with us. See you in the other webinars that we would organize. I would like to thank again our speakers. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bun.